Talk with Mitch Lafon.
We are speaking with the famed Canadian guitarist Rik Emmett. The in fact, you've got 11 solo albums that are being reissued. As we say in Montreal, bonjour Rik, comment allez-vous? How are you?
Très bien, merci. I have a new lease on life here. I records coming out from a new label, and I'm doing Zoom things all day long. It's crazy.
Yeah, same with me. And in fact, I wasn't doing these until about a week ago, and somebody said, Rik Emmett's doing Zoom, so you got to have Zoom. And I'm like, oh, well, if Rik Emmett wants to do Zoom, I gotta get Zoom. But it's been let us talk quickly about these reissues. And were they at all changed from their original forms? Have you rethought them, added some parts, remastered them, done anything? Or are these the albums that fans have known over the years, but now just available digitally?
Yeah, and the reason that they've kind of, this is the way it's gone, is that when I would, I sort of gave up on the mainstream music business right around 1995 or so. And it was sort of giving up on me. But I wasn't going to give up on being a creative person. So I would still make records, and I built my own little digital studio in my basement, and I became an indie artist, And when I would first come out with a new record, I would manufacture a product and take it out and sell it live off the stage, et cetera, et cetera. And then as time went on and the new records were coming along, the old ones I would kind of lose interest in. I had many that were partnered up. I did a bunch with Dave Dunlop, who was strung on Troubadours. I did a real hard rockin' one, which would go along with all the flames behind you there, called Liberty Manifesto by Airtime. It was a project I did with a friend named Mike Schotten. And
from Von Groove.
But then, sorry?
From Von Groove.
Yeah. So after again, years go by and you go, well, I've lost my interest in manufacturing that stuff and lugging it out on the road. Plus, it's a pain in the ass to have to account to these guys, twice a year or 4 times a year or whatever, So I go, I don't want to do that. So then I would just stop putting them out on the side. I wouldn't sell them anymore. Wouldn't allow downloads, wouldn't manufacture them up. They weren't that happy about that, but they'd had their run, and they'd have to accept their fate. While I went on to stuff that I could own 100%, which, I would still offer it for download and stuff. So anyways, long story short, Roundhill came along and they did the Triumph stuff. They bought up Triumph's catalog and they were doing all that and they're putting it on vinyl and they're doing all this stuff. And then they said, hey, Rik, what about your stuff? Did you ever put it on iTunes? I go, well, I think I had a couple of them on iTunes for a while. Did you ever do Pandora or any? I go, no, I never did streaming. I never worried about that shit. And they go, well, okay, well, that's what we'll do. We're going to try and put them out digitally everywhere. And I think it's like a litmus test, right? If they do well digitally, then I think they might go, hey, let's try 150 gram vinyl, like they might, yeah, who knows, or they might go, wow, this is a disappointment.
Well, I doubt it'll be a disappointment, but all right, let me ask you this, because you did say you left the music business around 95. You have said that one of the reasons you left Triumph was because the music was too narrow, because it was hard rock and it was too narrow. Is that what you wanted to do when you went solo? Just really explore and do all the kinds of things that an arena rock band couldn't do?
Yes, absolutely. But it had to become a gradual process because when I left the band in '88, the first 3 records I made, you can, if somebody sat down and listened to them, the first one you go, well, this isn't too far away from FM hard rock radio-ish, Triumph-ish. Yes, there's a female sax player in there that's, yes, it's a 6-piece band instead of a 3-piece. Rik's singing everything, which is an indicator of, that's right. Rik went from being in a kind of a democratic, brand-driven thing to having a benevolent dictatorship of his own creativity and artistic choices. So, which is why anybody leaves a band. You know, you're looking to sort of sow the oats that you couldn't do in the situation that you were in. So, you know, after doing those first three albums, they went from sort of, you know, guy in a black leather jacket with a black Les Paul on the cover to singer-songwriter, you know, sitting looking at the floor with his archtop guitar, you know, being much more introspective. And that's pretty much what was my intention when I was leaving Triumph in the first place, was that I wanted to convert from being sort of, you know, a guitar hero in front of a rock band that had a huge production to being just a singer-songwriter again, you know, bring it back to that fundamental thing. So, but then the music business was changing too. Like nobody wanted Triumph anymore anyways, in the sense of who wanted arena rock bands that had sort of converted from being MTV darlings in 1980 to being hair bands in 85, 86, 87, you know, and now along had come Nirvana and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. And so the world was, rock radio was changing, you know, and I was getting older. So around in 95, 96, the first independent record I made for myself was a classical guitar record. You know, like I went all the way back to, you know, the first good guitar that I ever owned was a nylon string classical guitar. So I started all over. And I think this is what happens, you know, you artistically, you do tend to kind of circle back. And I probably circled back now about 4 times in my life. So
You mentioned the word brand in that answer. How important is brand and building a new brand? Because you know you have the Triumph brand, which is very successful, and you could go out tomorrow morning and put it on the marquee, and it would sell perfectly fine. How important is brand and actually rebuilding sort of the Rik Emmett brand?
well, let's preface this, Mitch, with the fact that you're talking to a guy that he likes to take sticks of dynamite, find a crack, put it in there, and blow it up. And you know, I've screwed with expectations ever since I got out of Triumph. I've made classical records and jazz records, blues records, rock records. You know, I've kind of run the gamut of the things that I feel I'm kind of good at. You know, desperately trying to hide the things that I'm not so good at. And there's things that I really love that there's not really like, and I'll give you an example. I've written a book of poetry and shopped it around and found a publisher that's willing to put it out. There wasn't a publisher that I didn't talk to that didn't go, you know, poetry, it's like, it's not a very good business move. Like, yeah, and branding yourself as a poet might not necessarily be, you know, great for any kind of a financial thing. Are you aware of this? And I'm going, yes, of course I am. I've made jazz records. I know that jazz is like 1% of the marketplace. And of that 1%, it's mostly people buying old Miles Davis records or something, you know, like they're not going to, I get it. I was on the faculty at Humber College with tremendous jazz artists who are teachers because they can't really earn enough money as a jazz musician to, you know, put food on the table for their kids. So the whole idea of branding and marketing, it's a weird thing. It's like there's no way around it. You have to do it. You have to try and generate some sort of interest that goes beyond you know, the actual music that you've made and the work that you've done. So how are you surrounding it? And the ideas of fashion. I'll tell you a little anecdote because this is a kind of a funny thing. When I was teaching the business course at Humber, music business, I had one young lady, and the school, she was a problem child. You know, the school said like, look, this one's it's a challenge. You know, what are you going to do? And Rik, we want you to deal with this challenge. And so, you know, I had her in my class for a while, and she asked really good questions. She was smart and she was driven. You know, she had, and that I think speaks to your question about brand and imaging and marketing and stuff. If there's a burning ambition, this is naturally going to become a part of it. And so I looked at this kid and I thought, she never handed in assignments on time. She missed tests, in class tests and stuff. But she was smart. So I sat her down and I said, look, here's what you're going to do, Sally. You're going to go, there's a David Bowie thing that's at the museum right now. And it's a, art gallery or something. It was like a David Bowie show that was touring around the world. I said, I want you to go to that. I want you to do a case study of David Bowie. And then here's a government website where it talks about building business plans and marketing plans. And so I want you don't even have to come to my class. I don't care. Just make sure you get your assignments in on time. I want you to build a business marketing plan for yourself based on what you learned from the career of David Bowie. So go and do that. So she's got a record deal now. That girl, she got like 95 from me. She was unbelievable when she was allowed to write her own ticket based on who she was and what she felt was, what she could do. It was a miracle. It was fantastic. It was a great teaching experience for me. So, as far as brand goes, I really feel you got to make your choices based on who you are and what you're good at, and it can't be phony. It has to be real. But of course, can it be that you jump around in spandex pants? Yes, I did that because I was pretty good at it. I liked it. I was not afraid to, be the class clown. It came kind of naturally to me, So would I do it now? I think it would be.
Yeah, the reunion tour in spandex would be a bit rough. Since you're talking business, let me ask you about the Canadian business. How did you and Triumph get out of the business? Because I've had this conversation with Lawrence Gowan, and he said, you know what? The record companies sandboxed us. They did not want to have Gowan in the States. They did not want to have Gowan in England. It was a Canadian thing. The guys in Platinum Blonde, same thing. Glass Tiger, Honeymoon Suite. Oh, the record companies just wanted us to be great Canadian bands. How did you manage to get out of the we're just Canadian bands and get out of that sandboxing? And what was the Canadian business doing back in those days, sort of limiting the potential success for a band?
Well, I mean, that was never my experience. So,
Right.
I can't speak to what those other guys said. I do know that, like Kim Mitchell's a friend of mine, and I know that Kim's struggled to try and break through in the States, even though he tried, but it was hard. In Triumph's case, right from day one, when I came and auditioned with the other two guys to see if they wanted to have me in the band, they had a plan, and part of that plan was, no, we're going to be huge. We're going to go, and the minute we can get down and into the States, we're going to do it. We're going to cross the border. Besides, American dollars are worth even more than ours. That like Triumph was as much of a kind of a preconceived business adventure as much as it was, hey man, we got a band, we're making music, And I think that's maybe part of what you're saying, is that there was more of a kind of a youthful naivete that existed in the Canadian scene. And part of that was because Canada has always been the place of singer-songwriters. It's always been the place of, Gordy Lightfoot and Murray McLaughlin and
Joni Mitchell and stuff.
yeah, Leonard Cohen. So the singer-songwriter thing, it's much more rootsy, folky. Hey, let's not put on any airs here. Let's just do the folk festival, and maybe Bob Dylan will come and sit in with you, and we'll write about that. And I'm not putting down the Canadian media or the surrounding industry. It's just it was a more naive kind of a one, and CanCon made big changes to that, of course, historically. But anyhow, yeah, I mean, we were always, right from the get-go, it was more important. Can we get on the radio in the States was a huge thing for us. And Mike Levine had sort of a background about knowing about radio marketing and um, promotion, radio promotion. So he was in there right from the first album. Mike was phoning music directors and program directors, and you get the radio airplay. Well, now a promoter will say, yeah, come and play the market. And then you got to work the record company and you got to get the tour support so you can, because you're never going to make any money. But Triumph was, again, predicated on certain things. All those other people you talked to, they never did what we did. And what we did in the early stages was we went and borrowed a lot of money from the Musicians Credit Union so that we could have our own lights and PA and a tractor trailer. So we were in huge debt. But when we went and played shows in the States where you couldn't get paid much money to be the band playing, you could get the $1,500 or $2,000 to be the people that were supplying the sound and lights. So we were playing these gigs where, it was like a local FM radio 99-cent ticket. The record company's giving us tour support. But when we played the gig, the promoter's giving us, I don't know, $1,000 to play as the band and $3,000 for sound and lights. So with $4,000 for the gig, we can pay ourselves, we can cover our expenses, and we've broken the market. So nobody else did that. That was Triumph's kind of. So when you talk about branding, that's not a branding thing, but it's an identity thing. It goes right down to the nuts and bolts of what the machine is,
And that's funny because they always say when you hire a musician, a lead singer, make sure he has his own PA. So, so that's what you did. You mentioned Bob Dylan in that answer, and of course, the eponymous Bob Dylan album of 1962 means a lot to you. It is what led to these Bonfire Sessions. There's going to be a 6-pack, 6 of these Bonfire Sessions available. From what I see on the website, 3 are currently available. Talk to me about those sessions because when you start, opening the thesaurus, you think of emotive, you think of heartfelt, you think of, there's a warmth to this. Talk to me about that session. When exactly were they recorded? Was it all 2019? Was it before the Bonfire Sessions?
Yeah, there was some, I think, in 2019, but most of it was beginning of 2020. And I worked with an engineer named Steve Skingley. I went to Long McQuaid's and I bought myself a couple of good tube mics, brand new ones. And I literally said, okay, what Dylan would do is just sit down in front of the mics and do this, and I'd play 5 or 6 songs a night. And then Steve would go off and mix them. And sometimes I'd say, yeah, we'll try that one again. Or sometimes I go, okay, that's good, that's done. And I'd move on. And I liked it because it was going to be sort of like Rik Emmett getting really naked, in his old age. All the wrinkles and all of this turkey stuff, like it is what it is, So I like that, and I called it "Farewell for the folk songs for the farewell bonfire" because I can remember being in high school and we would, we go to Wasaga Beach and we build a bonfire and I get out my guitar and I would play songs and the kids would, we'd all be singing along and, I'd be playing versions of Paul Simon tunes like "I Am a Rock" and I have the wrong chord changes and be in the wrong key and whatever, it was like, that was my life. And that's sort of where I started. So I wanted to come back to that full circle. So that's the first part of it. The other part of it is there was somewhere inside me, I was thinking, this might be the end. I might not, this may be my, farewell, see you later. And if I'm going to do that, I want to do it so that it's just a handwritten note. It's not a heavily embellished, oh, and here come the strings. And, like the record that I did with Mike Schotten from Von Groove, that thing got Pro Tools to death. We had layers and layers of guitars and vocals and, every vocal I would do, he'd say, okay, let's double that. Okay, now I'm going to do a harmony and I'm going to double the harmony. Now I'm going, okay, wow, that's a lot of, we're already 4 tracks in on the vocals, So with the Bonfire thing, I'm going, 2 tracks, that's what we're going to deal with here, and so anyhow, that was the thinking behind it. Now that it's come out and it's, of course, the Roundhill thing happens and the Triumph documentary thing happens and there's all this shit's flying now in my life, and I'm going, well, and it has its impact on the Bonfire stuff, which is, I'm only really doing it off my own site, but it's doing okay. So I'm going, well, maybe I could do another one of these next year if I wrote the tunes, or 5 years from now, or like whatever. I might not hang it up. Oh, and here's another little anecdote for you. I have an endorsement deal with a pickup company, MJS Pickups, and there's a young guy named Nathan Whitney. He plays in Thomas Rhett's band. They were on Saturday Night Live last year and stuff. And Nathan was a student of mine, but he's gone on to his own glory, and he's an unbelievably great guitar player. So one thing leads to another. The MJS, they make this guitar with these new pickups in it, and they go, hey, will you guys do like a little video together? I don't know, we don't care what, but just the two of you. And so Nathan and I start, talking on the phone and putting it together. So tomorrow I'm going to shoot this video, and I'm going to get my ass kicked with this country picking, like just crazy, like Chet Atkins, Travis picking kind of stuff. And it's right up Nathan's alley, but I've had to be practicing for a couple of weeks just to try and keep pace. But it's fun again, like it. And so this goes back to maybe another question that you asked, and it's like the branding. For me, I always wanted music to be like an adventure. I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be challenging. I didn't want it to be like, right, I got to put on that suit. I got to play those same old songs, or I've got to write in that same old sandbox. I always wanted to say, no, come on. Let's put a different spin on it somehow. I used to tell my music students, you're a musician. And when you're looking into new music, you're staring into the face of God. Okay, that's as infinite as the challenge gets. So you better be humble about this, because it's a beautiful, heavy-duty calling, but it's tough, it's hard, and I never ever wanted to not feel like that was a part of what I was doing, that I was sort of taking on some of the infinite challenge of it, and I have a lot of limitations, Mitch, like, but I feel like it's kind of part of the gig to push at the boundaries of those limitations.
It is. I'm just going to ask you just real quick, because you mentioned Pro Tools and layering and having 87 vocal tracks and 92 guitar tracks. When you got to Thunder 7 and Sport of Kings, the band is in that era where everything had extra sugar on it. You had to put a layer of sugar, right? You had these nice rock songs, and then they said, put some sugar on it, Was that where you sort of said, we're a rock band. We're not this sugared up thing. Are you happy with those albums? Did it get to a point where you just went, wow, this is not what it's about? Because those are very slick albums.
Yes. But we've mentioned Dylan in this, and I've been reading a lot of books about him, the things that he wrote about himself, the interviews that he's done lately. I've kind of been on a real Dylan kick, and I'd like to sort of, I'm not claiming any Dylan territory here, but I am similar to him in that he moves on. He does something and it's done, and now he's moving on to whatever's next. Because to me, that's the sign of an artist. You're looking at the horizon. You're not really looking back over your shoulder. So I hardly ever listen to old stuff. It's done, and it was what it was then. It's a historical kind of record, but I'm moving on, and I've got other stuff that I'm worried about. And one of the standard questions you get asked in interviews all the time is, "Oh, so what's your favorite song? What's your favorite album that you've done?" I go, "It's the next one." Like, it's always in the next one. Like, I much prefer the idea of the thing that's in my head than the thing that I recorded a year ago or 10 years ago. Now, I know that's not the way it is for an audience. I know that people, as certainly in their teenage years, they listen to records, it becomes the soundtrack of their life. And, you know, I have those records myself in my own life, you know, Steely Dan records and Led Zeppelin records. And, you know, there's stuff that I love it. But the process is never one for me of sort of going back, you know. And yes, you're right. There were those times of layering and building, and even when I left Triumph and went indie, the guy Andy Hermant ran Duke Street Records, and I was doing the Spiral Notebook record, and I was playing him some mixes, some monitor mixes, at a certain stage of the development of that record, and he said, "Okay, so now you got to put on the ear candy." And I go, "The what?" And he goes, "The ear candy. Like, I want the things that are going to, you know, something's over here in the stereo spectrum, or something goes across, or I want, you got to put a little, you know, percussion track in behind that we're going to phase or something." And I'm going, ear candy. Yeah, okay, you know. Now, Andy was an engineer, you know, that's essentially his background. So he's going to think that way. And I'm going to just quickly, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my watch, I'm looking at you, I'm thinking, oh God, I got these every half hour, so I got to crack the whip here. Whenever a band is trying to make a definitive statement, or an artist, there comes a point in their career, and it could be right at the beginning, it could be in the middle, it could be, you know, towards the end. They make these, I call them chip on the shoulder records. They get to a point where they go, look, I want to make a definitive statement, and I'm not screwing around. We're going to go for it. They go for it on multi levels. The writing is going to be there. The pre-production that they do is going to be, you know, they're not going to leave anything to chance. And now they go in and the production begins, and they're going to suck cocaine up their nose and spend all night if that's what it takes. They're going to bring in 14 snare drums to try them. They're going to do whatever it takes. And some of the great records in the history of you know, rock and roll recording, to me, they're chip on shoulder records, you know. And I think you could look at Abbey Road and you could say, you know, they weren't leaving anything to chance. Like, even though they didn't even write full songs, you know, the medley was, they weren't even filling, but they were, it was the production of the record that made it. Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears, you know, Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd. They're trying to prove something. And this goes back to your question about brand. And that's going to be their brand now. What they've proven on such a heavy duty level. So sometimes, all that sugar that you talked about, that somehow becomes, that's what you got to do. Like your Mutt Lange, you're going to have, you know, choruses that are as big as the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, you know. Anyhow,
you gotta love Mutt Lange. Now I know we're running out of time, so we'll end there. But so many more questions. We didn't even get to the Banger film. We didn't get to live touring. But of course, the re-releases are out now. Do head over to rikemmett.com for everything, including the Bonfire Sessions, which I recommend picking up. And on that, as we say in Montreal, merci. And hopefully at some point we can do a part 2 because there's so many more questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. À bientôt. We'll do it again.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, Mitch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.